Go, the language is so mature that all the rough edges has been filed off. When I started, there were loads of sharp edges. And when there are sharp edges, it's really easy to just dive in and I've got this need to fix this thing, right? But now there aren't so many things to fix. And the things that are there to be fixed are pretty hard to fix. Mm-hmm. They're not easy because if they were easy, someone else would have done it, right?
Yeah.
If you actually want to contribute to Go, the core thing as well as the kind of social thing, just filing good issues can be really, really helpful. If you have an issue which you think is a bug, then you can complain about it, but filing a really good issue is actually really helpful.
Big thanks to our partners Linode, Fastly, and LaunchDarkly. We love Linode. They keep it fast and simple. Get $100 in credit at linode.com/changelog. Our bandwidth is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. And get your feature flags powered by LaunchDarkly. Get a demo at launchdarkly.com. What's up, Gophers? This episode is brought to you by our friends at Teleport. With Teleport Access Plane, you can quickly access any computing resource anywhere. Engineers and security teams can unify access to SSH servers, Kubernetes clusters, web applications, and databases across all environments. Teleport is open core, which you can use for free, and it's supported by their cloud-hosted version, which lets you forget about configuring, updating, or managing Teleport. The Teleport team does all that for you. Your team can focus on your projects and spend less time worrying about infrastructure access. Try Teleport today in the cloud, self-hosted, or open source. Head to goteleport.com to learn more and get started. Again, goteleport.com.
Let's do it. It's go time.
Welcome to Go Time, your source for diverse discussions from around the Go community. Subscribe if you're new at gotime.fm and follow the show on Twitter for the unpop polls, notifications of when we go live, and other solid tweets like interesting repos from your fellow Gophers. We are at GoTimeFM. All right, that's all from me. Here we go.
It's very exciting to be in the virtual room with people who use Go a lot longer than me. I'm super excited to welcome you all. Roger and Miki are our panelists for today, and Johnny, you are the co-host for today. Good evening, morning, afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Good evening.
So, Miki, you are an all-time Gopher. You are using Go for at least a decade now. You are all-time developer. Older times developer, started using in 97. What is the math behind that? What year are we now?
It's around 25 years now.
25 years, man.
Yes, that's professionally. I did some as a teenager, just playing around, but professionally started in 97.
That's really fun. That's a lot.
Makes me feel old.
And you are also teaching Go, and you're writing about Go, and you're making videos about Go, and you're also developing in Go. And you do all that with your company 353 Solutions. And thank you for joining us from Tel Aviv.
Yes, Binyamina.
Binyamina.
Close enough.
Roger, you are an aging Gopher. You describe yourself like that. And X-Plan 9, Inferno, long-time contributor. That's fun. And you work at Influx Data. And you're also a meetup organizer. Actually, both of you are meetup organizers.
This is true. Hi.
You're joining us from the UK.
Yep, I'm in Northumberland in the north of England, far north of England, just south of the Scottish border.
And you're actually bailing on your own Go meetup to join us today.
Yeah, unfortunately, a clash, but at least I can listen to that, back to that. I can't speak while I'm listening to that. So.
Only the organizers were organized. Talking about myself here, not about my co-organizer for this episode, Johnny. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. You have been using Go for 8 years, 9 years?
Yeah, something like that.
That's a long time.
Yeah, it's been great.
I want to start with a panelist, but actually first I want to ask you, Johnny, how did you start and why did you start using Go? How did that happen?
It was all kind of accidental. Career-wise, I was in a place where I'd been doing Ruby, my previous sort of full-time language, for a while. Before that, I'd done, some PHP, some Cold Fusion, some Java and whatnot. I was kind of looking for something new. And around the same time, a good friend of mine, Mark Bates, who's also every once in a while comes onto the show. And we travel sort of the same circles in the Boston area. We're like Boston Ruby co-organizers at some point. And he started getting into Go, and he sort of turned me on to it and says, hey, this is pretty cool. Check it out. And yeah, that's how I stumbled onto it and sort of got more and more curious about it. I think a few months later, we found ourselves, both Mark and I found ourselves headed to the very first GopherCon in Denver. Gosh, I can't remember the year now, 2013, 2014. Yeah, and ever since then, it was a kind of a smallish room, kind of a smallish conference, certainly based relative to the size it is now. There were maybe like 500 folks, I'd say, at most. And it was all single track, and you had like a dozen speakers go up there and talk about their experiences, and with each one, Rob Pike was at the first one and whatnot, and with each speaker that went up there and talked about their experiences with the language and sort of how it differed from other statically typed languages and whatnot, and the more I saw of it, the more I was like, okay, this is interesting. This speaks to me, right? Especially coming from having done years of dynamic programming, and I was like, okay, I think I might be ready to step my foot back into the more static typing kind of language, because I've been bitten so many times about dynamic languages for certain things. Obviously, I'm not saying dynamic languages are a bad thing, but they are. I was kind of feeling a need to sort of go back, right, to the more static side of things for a number of reasons, and this sort of fit my desire, right, my need for that kind of technology. So yeah, and ever since then, it's been first doing some side projects and getting more comfortable with it, and eventually getting a job writing it full time. And yeah, every job I've had since has been, I've had basically Go has played a major role in every role I've had since then, which I'm grateful.
So are we. You're a wonderful member of the community with all the teaching that you're doing. It's
oh, thank you.
It is awesome. Raj, how about you? How did you find yourself gophering?
I think I had a bit of a different background to most people. I got into this system came from Bell Labs called Plan 9 way back when I was at university in the sort of early 90s. And I'd been following along with that. And they also produced a system called Inferno, which was like it started at the same kind of time as Java. It was kind of JIT-based system. It had this really interesting language. I thought it was a really nice language called Limbo. And that had a lot in common with Go. And so I'd been doing some stuff with Inferno, and I'd had a full-time job doing that area. And that was kind of fizzling out, to be honest. And somebody, on the day it came out, somebody mentioned, oh, Go has come out today, and this new language. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And so I was actually staying in the Bay Area at the time, and I seem to remember that I found out about it in the afternoon, and I was going into town. I play the fiddle, and I was going into town to play in like a music session in town, and I found a printer, and I printed out the specification, and I read it on the bus on the way into San Francisco, just like leading through it. Oh yeah, oh that's interesting. So, and that's how I found out about Go. That's how I started, and from then on, I didn't look back really. I basically I took a year not doing anything, not doing any paid work. I was just working on Go in that year, basically.
When you say that somebody told you about that, did you overhear a conversation? Did you find it on Reddit? How did this magic happen?
So the reason I was in the Bay Area was I was with a guy that I worked for. He mentioned it to me. He said, hey, check this out. I was like, oh.
But there was no Slack. How did that happen?
How did he find out? I have no idea how he actually found out. I mean, there must have been. I remember joining the IRC channel the day after, and it was really active and chatted. Rob Pike was. I'd actually met Rob and various of the others like Russ and people at various Plan 9 because they were all at Plan 9 people before. So, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. Look, this directional channels because Limbo had channels like Go, but then there were some things that Go added, directional channels rather than just first-class channels. It's pretty interesting.
You mentioned you read the spec. Most people don't start out reading a spec when they're trying to pick up a new language.
But honestly, they write so well, and the spec is so readable. And if you've ever read the Go spec, it's ultra-readable. And also, I kind of knew what I was looking for, I suppose, because I read through it okay, now I know the language, right? But kind of.
Yeah, so I just checked. There are 163 people on the Go Nuts IRC channel right now. So it's still out there.
I haven't looked at the Go Nuts IRC channel for a number of years now.
Can't say I am there. Miki, how did you find out about the language?
So for me, it's a bit of a twisted path. I did mostly Python at the time, and they started talking about adding async IO to the language, which I didn't like. So I looked for other languages who support both a lot of concurrency and can use all the cores easily. If you're interested, there's one article called The Free Lunch is Over, which talks about the fact that clock cycles are staying the same and now we get more cores, and traditional languages, it's a problem for them to use that. And the second one is the C10K problem. How can I serve 10,000 connections from a single process? So I was looking for a language, and I looked at several of them. I like programming languages in general. And I tried out Erlang, Clojure, and Go. That Go was at the very beginning. Without the Go tool, we used Makefiles. And because I came from dynamic languages, I started actually with Clojure. And it was nice until my hatred of the JVM drove me away. And then I came back to Go. It was a bit more mature. And ever since, I'm really happy there.
I have to say, I missed the very interesting part, which is the beginning of exactly how did you hear about that? I know it was also not Slack.
Well, I have a 1-bit memory, so it's really hard for me to remember 11 years ago. But I went out looking for languages that can fit the profile I was looking for. So I don't remember exactly where I heard about that. Google came out with something, one of my RSS feeds, or
that was a wonderful tool. Mickey, I think we lost you, just like we lost the RSS feed by Google, which was a wonderful tool. We all loved it. I know I loved it very much. But you're back.
Okay, so yeah, RSS. I think just the mention of RSS made everything freeze. So.
It was Google Reader, right?
Yeah.
Google Reader, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the name? Yeah, I think so. That was not written in Go.
No,
It was great, though.
it was.
I think I'm one of the few people that I know that started using Go because of their work, but also use Go for a long time. I started it in 2014 because the company that I started working at was written exclusively in Go. Now it's kind of more popular. More and more people are joining because their employer is already using Go for a while, but now Go is 12 years old, so we have expanded.
It's also common now, or I should say more common now for, let's say, experienced developers who perhaps have, the option and luxury of sort of going on a longer job search to almost exclusively be looking for companies that do Go almost exclusively or a majority of their stack, right? So I know for me personally, if I were to start looking for work now, that would be one of my primary sort of influencers for where I go work, right? Do you use Go? Is that your sort of your go-to language for things? Not that I don't want to learn something new, but like I feel so much more productive in the language after having used it for so long. I almost feel like the quantity or amount or quality of value that I can deliver as a senior level engineer is kind of getting more and more tied to Go. Now, that could be a double-edged sword, right? Because technology doesn't last forever.
Well, COBOL, you know.
There is that.
And now it's a great job to have COBOL.
Yeah, there's like 2 people left who do it. So.
But Copilot, GitHub's Copilot supports, or Codex, one of those AI engines that do code, they support COBOL. So we're good. The banks will survive.
It hasn't gone away, right? Yeah. But I mean, I'd say, from a career standpoint, if somebody's listening to this podcast and you're wondering, okay, I'm dipping my toes in the Go and should I make the jump? I will resoundingly say absolutely. I think Go is no longer in the infancy of its adoption, but I think it's on the infancy of its longevity. Right, it's gonna be around for a while. It's gonna be like a Java, right? Hopefully not too enterprisey, but it will be around. It will have the longevity of something like a C or a Java. It's gonna be around because so much technology is being built on it and being built with it, and that stuff's not gonna go anytime soon. There's only gonna be a greater and greater need for Go developers. So now is as good a time as any to jump on it because you're not gonna be without work if you know your way around Go.
Yes, I think every language has a killer feature, and for Go, it's the Docker and Kubernetes ecosystem that's giving a big of a push.
Roger might have a different opinion. What do you think, Roger?
Early on in Go, of course, I wanted a job in the Go ecosystem. There was no Go ecosystem at that point. And I realized that, this was the language I actually wanted to work in, and there was nothing. So luckily, after I've been doing it about a year, and the nice thing about joining a language really early on is that there's loads of bugs, loads of low-hanging fruit, loads of bugs to fix. So there's loads of little features. You like, oh, it's missing this. So it's really easy to get into contributing. Because originally, like, it was things like, I remember this bit, there was time.sleep, used up a whole OS thread if you did a sleep in the runtime. This is not great, right? If you want lots of Go routines that are actually doing some time-related stuff. So I did the first implementation of time.sleep that didn't use an OS thread. And there was me and this one other guy, Gustavo Niemeyer, who you might have heard of. And we both produced these different implementations and had this nice interaction. And a little bit later, he was like, we're just starting to do some stuff in Go. Do you want a job? And I was like, oh, okay then. So that's, I think Go's got loads of potential niches. I think Kubernetes is a really big one, but there's nothing about Kubernetes that necessarily means that anything has to be programmed in Go, right? Because mostly you interact with it through an API, and it just happens that most of the API is defined in Go, so it's easy to use. But I think the engineering properties of Go are really great, and it has some excellent properties compared to something like, Rust perhaps is safer, but it's also harder to use, right? A lot harder to use. And so, I think it hits a sweet spot in lots of respects.
You mentioned, Roger, that you spent your first year after discovering Go just playing around with it and building projects kind of for fun. So some of the things you were doing is contributing to the code base. What other projects did you think that Go would be a good match for? And what in the properties of it kind of made you think that?
I'm not sure I had a good idea about what particular kind of areas it might be a good match for. I was playing around. I did some graphics stuff, like there was an X11 driver for it. So, there's some other code. I remember playing around with that. I built little tools. So one of the tools I built was this thing called GoDef, which enabled you to click on something in your editor on a Go symbol, and it would take you to where that symbol was defined. And that was actually used in Go Vim for quite a long time because I built it in a way that was really easy to use. I actually built it for the editor that I use, which nobody else uses.
Is that Emacs?
No.
Is that Emacs?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Shadow shade.
Yeah, no, Vim.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah, so I was just building little things. GoDef ended up quite widely used, and I went back earlier thinking, so that, the first commits on there, I was doing stuff back in May of 2010, that around then I was kind of starting, because the way that GoDef came about is I was looking at the Go AST packages and the Go parser packages, where it would make it really easy for you to parse Go source code. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I just built a little thing to parse it. And I was like, you know what? You could probably work out where, if you just had a little bit of intelligence there, you could actually work out where these symbols were defined. And you can actually do it really efficiently. Unfortunately, GoDef these days is really slow because it uses the standard tooling, which basically reads everything into memory. That at the time it was pretty nice because it would just do it lazily. So it just read only the symbol, only the bit of code that it needed, and it would just resolve exactly that. So it would resolve a symbol within a couple of milliseconds, which is from scratch, from cold, it was pretty cool at the time. Now, of course, you've got Go IDE or Go, I can't remember what it's called.
Goland?
I'm thinking of the integrated developer stuff.
Oh, the language server.
Yeah, language, yeah. Go please.
Yes.
Yeah, every editor uses that now, right? I think almost exclusively at this point.
Almost every editor, yeah.
It's nice that the IDE developers decided on a same protocol for every language, and makes it easy.
Mickey, how about you? What were the first project or projects that you found Go to be a good match for them, and what in the specs then made it stand out?
For me, it was, I wanted to try out Go, so I wanted to write something, and I said, let's write something that has a value. And I just came out from a company that did a lot of work with Selenium, and I said, okay, let's write the Selenium driver for Go, which I did. And then I learned a lot about how to write Go code, interfaces, networking, everything. So it was a good match for Go to do that, to basically run tests. Currently, it's maintained by Eric from Google. Thank you, Eric, for doing that.
Which Eric?
Oh, I forgot his last name. Sorry.
Not Clapton.
No.
Not gross.
As a side note, it's really, really hard to get rid of your open source project and find someone else who'll maintain them. So I'm really thankful for that. After that, I dipped my toe that says I'm going to do something inside Go itself. So I wrote the initial implementation for the parallel testing feature. And that was my first interaction with the core Go team. And I learned so much of how to do designs, how to do reviews. I think it was like 14 cycles of code reviews before it got in. I think, Rog, you were there as well.
Sorry, which feature was this? I missed.
The parallel testing, T.parallel.
Oh, the parallel stuff.
Oh, parallel testing.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
And after that, a lot of other things.
I just snuck Go into every organization I could find wherever I went to work. I just snuck it in, and I'd usually do it with like a command line tool. That was my beachhead, basically. Just build a CLI tool, and then deliberately have another developer in the team extend it. Say like, oh, you want to add support for that? Yeah. Just go in the repo, just check it out, and then if you have any questions, let me know. They'll go to it and be like, this isn't Go. I'm like, yeah, it'll be fine. Just check it out. And if you don't have Go, just download it here. Like it's super, super simple. And they kind of be, like give me the side eye, like a little skeptic. I'm like, it'll be fine. You want me to come pair with you? Like, let's just do it. And then we'd sit down, and then, like all of a sudden you'd see sort of the hesitation. So start to dissipate a little bit, because they're like, okay, this is kind of nice. I don't need, any super fancy things or anything heavy. Oh my God, it compiles so fast. It's almost like I'm scripting. I'm like, yeah, it's awesome, isn't it? And yeah, and then next thing you know, we'd open up a PR and boom, and that was it. And then just, one at a time, I'd just be converting people. Obviously, not every company was appreciative of how I was converting everybody into using a non-sanctioned language. But, eventually folks started to see the value, because beyond the CLIs, what typically would happen, there'll be one developer, not me. At that point, I'd be removing myself from the equation and letting people just, run with it and see where they go with it. And somebody would suggest, hey, how about we, write this API or this REST service or whatever it is. How about we do that in Go? Because I heard it's pretty fast, pretty good at that stuff. And there's like libraries and stuff we can use already. Can we just do one of those things? And then with some reluctance, the manager or technical lead would be like, okay, fine. And then we'd try it, and it would be so fast compared to other things, which I would not name because that's not the point, but it'd be so much faster than what they typically would be using. And then that's really how that whole transition would start to happen. People would be like, I'm more productive. This is a safe language to use. It's going to catch things that normally I'd go find out about at runtime. This is the process for getting this work done. Even when novice developers were actually dabbling with concurrency stuff and wanting to use Go teams and everything else, with a little bit of guidance, they were so productive. And they're like, okay, at that point, once I've planted that seed, I just step back and watch it grow, because Go really just speaks for itself. It's that good of a language.
That is an awesome strategy. I think that command line clients, the fact that Go compiles to a static binary is a great thing, because writing CLI tools, so what do I need to install? Just grab the executable. No JVM, no pip install, no NPM or whatever. So this is really a good niche to start with.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at LaunchDarkly. Feature management for the modern enterprise. Power testing in production at any scale. Here's how it works. LaunchDarkly enables development teams and operation teams to deploy code at any time, even if a feature isn't ready to release to users. Wrapping code with feature flags gives you the safety to test new features and infrastructure in your production environments without impacting the wrong end users. When you're ready to release more widely, update the flag status, and the changes are made instantaneously by the real-time streaming architecture. Eliminate risk, deliver value, get started for free today at launchdarkly.com. Again, launchdarkly.com.
Had earlier or last month an episode about hacking with Go, and the same thing, the fact that it's so easily cross-compiled to everything, is a favorite feature of some people who use Go for their malware. It is very convenient. It's very efficient.
Nice. Ransomware. Go friendly. Goes friendly to ransomware. You heard it here first.
Go pay.
Go pay. Nice.
I didn't write that.
So you say.
So you mentioned some of the contributions that you were doing to the community over the time, or to Go in general. So obviously, everybody here actually is a community organizer, right? We all organize meetups in our local area.
Yep.
So there's that. There is contributing to the documentation. There's making some of the pull requests of the fun features that you added. Let's chat a little bit about that. What are some fun contributions that you feel that you've made?
I started the LA Gophers when I was in LA. And the fun contribution was asking Francesc Campoy to come over. And he came over from San Francisco on a bike.
Wait, how long was that?
How far was this?
Isn't that like 1 hour flight from San Francisco to LA?
Yeah, something like that. But on bike, I think it was...
Must be a lot on a bike.
Yeah.
Was it more than 1 day?
No, I don't think it was more than a single day. But it was a very long day for him. So this was a fun contribution, just making him get in shape. But I think the meetups are important. Now I'm doing it here in Israel. It's good for the community. I think COVID is doing really horrible things to meetups. So we're going back to physical ones start of next year, January.
Oh, already next year. Oh, nice.
Yes, we help to start. And I think the local meetups are really important. A lot of companies don't know that other companies right next in the building are doing Go. And it's sometimes fun, like, oh, you're doing Go as well. Well, let's talk about what you're doing and see some libraries. And I think this in-person meeting is sometimes even more important than the talks themselves. So I really like it.
Can you tell us a little bit about how Go got adopted in the Israeli scene?
Oh, a lot of companies.
Would you say it happened early on? Would you say it happened recently?
I would say I'm doing both. I'm involved both in the Python and the Go community, and it was more Python, less Go, and now it's about 50-50 Python and Go. So it's taking over, I would say, maybe in the last 3 or 4 years, but maybe it's just me in my echo chamber. So I'm not totally sure if that's true. I see more companies using it. It's more widespread. Big companies, big names, a lot of interesting things, both in the cyber section, telecommunication, ad tech, you name it, it's there.
Would you say that is something that happened early on, so in the beginning of Go, so like last 10, 12 years or recently?
No, I think in the last 4 years, something like that.
Nice, interesting. Raj, how is it in the north of the UK?
The north of the UK, well, there was a long time where I thought there were actually no Gophers here at all. Absolutely none. There was a time when GitHub did this, you are the top developer in your area thing. And I was like, oh, I'm the top Go developer in the Northeast. No. Then there's, there's none, right? Except there's someone else. I'm like, oh, who's this other person? And so we got chatting on Twitter. And it's like, oh, there's someone else. Maybe we should have a meetup, right? Maybe we should,
Of two.
Okay, well, who knows? There might be others, I think I had a meetup account from joining some other Go meetup in the US. And I was like, oh, I'll just put it on, see what happens. And a bunch of people came along. And so that's how our meetup in Newcastle got started and just sort of carried along.
When was that? How many years ago?
No, that's a really good question. About maybe 5 years ago or something, something like that. It's been going a little while.
So for 5 years, you were kind of alone in your area, and then the next 5 years were more fun.
Yeah, but you're never alone on the internet. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much it. I didn't know of anyone. To be honest, most of the people that come along to the meetup tend to be people that are interested in Go, not people that are actually actively working in Go. But, I've been working, ever since that first Go job, I've been working remotely. So, that's the thing, that there don't have to be anyone in your local area that programs in Go or programs in whatever you want to program in. You can just get a remote job, and that's awesome, because now I'm in the middle of absolutely nowhere in the wilds of Northumberland, and I've got a fine job at Influx, and it's awesome.
And other than the meetup, do you see that the tech ecosystem is adopting Go? Or how is the adoption looking like?
I don't know, because I don't really keep a finger on the pulse. I see there are lots of people using it. I see new projects made with it. Mm-hmm. There are a bunch of, possible alternatives. The one that's often mentioned is Rust. But having tried to use Rust, I spent a little bit of time. I'm like, this isn't a real alternative. This is a complementary thing.
Exactly.
And somebody could make a version of Rust which like, had a garbage collector, for example, and then it would be way, way easier to use. But I don't see people actually doing that. And I think that Go has some fantastic things going for it. And I think the way forward with generics and stuff, they fit really nicely into the language. And I think it's a really, really positive thing. And I think more and more people will continue to use it.
Johnny, how's it for you? Do you see, how did the meetup start? How long has the meetup going? How is the tech ecosystem?
Well, I'm in kind of a sort of the DC metro area. So there's a good bit of technology activity going on in these parts. And before that, I was in the Boston area. That's actually where I went from organizing the Boston Ruby group to starting the Boston Go user group. Actually, in all fairness, there was a Go user group, but it was kind of dormant. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to start a new one. and then a couple weeks later, somebody reached out and says, hey, we already had a meetup. I'm like, well, it wasn't meeting. So, we kind of joined forces and kind of rekindled it, if you will. And then, by the time I did that for maybe 3 years, by the time I left Boston to come back down to Maryland, where my brother family resides, it was like a thriving community. And I'm glad and grateful that I had a hand in that. And I'm glad I had people join me along the way to help keep it alive. And to this day, it's still going strong. So I'm pretty happy about that. The moment I relocated to Maryland, the closest metro area to me is Baltimore. But so basically, I had to end up driving like a good 30 minutes to get to Baltimore to actually run a meetup. But there was no Go meetup in this area. So again, here too, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start one. Right. So I was basically trying to be the change I wish to see. Right. So basically, I knew there were some people interested in it. And I was like, okay, you know what? You've got the experience in starting and running meetups, and why not? So I did it for the one around here. And we've been going strong for 5 years now. So we've had the Baltimore Go meetup for 4+5 years now. Like we're saying, basically the pandemic has had sort of a chilling effect on all meetups, right? We used to meet face to face, and part of the fun was meeting face to face and the camaraderie and everything else. And that added an additional sort of layer to it, because we were already all online most of the time doing our jobs, and getting a chance to meet in person was part of the appeal, right? And when we had to go back to all online, then it became, oh man, I got to get into another Zoom today. So it was it kind of had a chilling effect. I think every meetup organizer will tell you that. Like everybody else, I think we're going to try to get back to face-to-face in Q1 of next year. We'll see what happens if it's January or February, but we're definitely going to try and do that again. We tried doing that about a month and a half or so ago, after vaccine was starting to spread and some of the restrictions were being lifted, but it was just still too early. Like we had 3 people show up when we usually had 20. So I was like, okay, it's still a little too early. So now we're going to try and do that again, in the new year. And hopefully, obviously the numbers continue to go down, even if they do the little roller coaster thing, but hopefully it's a downward trend. And, that way people feel more comfortable joining us back in person, because I really do believe that helps foster community. Beyond that, really, one of the best ways that I can contribute, that I used to also in person, was to run workshops in the Baltimore area, free workshops for people who want to learn Go. In a lot of cases, want to learn programming, period, right? And I've had the opportunity to introduce Go as a first programming language to a lot of folks. And again, here too, I'm absolutely grateful for the opportunity to do that. For me, the biggest thing I can do as a teacher is to make you fall in love with something, right? If you're coming into programming for the very first time, a good experience with a teacher can make or break your desire to continue to learn and to keep going and stay in this industry, break into this field, right? Which could be life-changing from a career perspective. So, whenever I get these opportunities, I do not take them for granted. I try to do the very best that I can as a teacher, right, as a trainer, to relay information the best way that I can, right, so that I can sort of foster that appetite, foster that love, right? Not just for Go, but really for the field in general. The whole field can benefit from more a diversity of thought, right? A diversity of people, right? So I definitely try to do that, and I teach workshops freely, and that's something I'm very much looking forward to being able to do again once we're able to meet face to face. But it's much harder to do these things online these days. I think people they're zoomed out, they're hangouts, whatever, webinars, whatever. I think people just want to go back into the sort of the face to face, in person kind of experience. But I'm looking forward to contributing and back in that way. Interestingly enough, I've met people saying, "Oh yeah, you must be contributing a lot of code to Go and everything." I'm like, no, there's not a single commit. Well, there might be maybe one commit, but there's not a ton of commits. You're not gonna see my name all over the Go code base, right? My contributions are about community. They're about people. They're about bringing more people into the Go community, and that's where I see myself making the biggest impact. And that's usually how I go about it. So for those of you who are thinking, man, the only way I can contribute is by writing code. Absolutely not. There are so many ways you can contribute, right? You can make things a little easier for those who do want to go into code, who do want to sort of contribute in different ways. There's so many ways to contribute. It's not just, GitHub commits that make you a contributor to a community.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between a user of the language and a developer of the language. And you can be a good citizen in the Go community by using the language and making it better without actually developing any feature or doing any bug fix to the language itself.
Yeah, like Go, the language is so mature that all the rough edges has been filed off. As I was saying, when I started, there were loads of sharp edges, and when there are sharp edges, it's really easy to just dive in and I've got this need to fix this thing, right? But now it's really hard to get into actually. There aren't so many things to fix, right? And the things that are there to be fixed are pretty hard to fix. Mm-hmm. They're not easy because if they were easy, someone else would have done it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that John is absolutely right. That I hardly ever contribute. I kind of like contributing to Go, but I've done like 2 features in the last 3 years or something. It's like nothing. If you actually want to contribute to Go, the core thing as well as the kind of social thing, just filing good issues. If you have problems, then actually contributing can be really, really helpful, I think. If you have an issue which you think is a bug, then you can complain about it, but filing a really good issue is actually really helpful.
Right.
And if you are an early user that you're not even finding bugs, which you can always do, is answer questions on Slack, for example. There's always somebody newer than you, and somebody who answered many newbie questions sometimes will be over-answered and will not want to answer. So step in, answer some questions, whatever you can. It's always a great way to nurture the community.
Some of the Go team members are really good examples in that regard. Like you see on the Go Nuts News, the mailing list, Ian Lance Taylor, he's one of the original 3 contributors, and he basically knows everything, and he will not ever look down on a question. He answers the questions at face value really well, and it's an object lesson to all of us not to be snarky, because it's so easy. Like, oh, they're asking that same thing that I've heard ask 100 times before, to just say, look, go and look back into the archives.
Read the docs, yeah.
Yeah, read the docs. Rati FM.
We do try to avoid that. It's true.
I think that community vibe, which Go managed to do a really nice job of creating a good, helpful, polite community is very important. And I think people who are coming into Go and they ask questions, they feel welcome, which is awesome.
Feeling welcome is always great. Would you all say that a decade ago, it was also a welcoming community? Yeah. Nodding for agreement. Are there any interesting changes that you noticed over this decade in the community, or obviously the language changed a lot as well? Anything interesting that you would point out from those changes?
Something immediately comes to mind, and that's the code of conduct. Mm-hmm. That's gone through a few iterations. We have a Go code of conduct for the community. That's gone through a few iterations. That's now sort of headed by and managed by the core group of people on the Go team, and some other involved community members as well. That's gone through some iterations, and it's gotten more refined, and all in the pursuit of making this a safe and welcoming community for everybody, right? Every now and then, folks will run afoul of that, whether they realize it or not. What I can say to that is basically, if you know that you're running afoul of our code of conduct, you don't necessarily have to agree with everything it says, but you have to respect it, right? Because this is sort of the body, right, of work that basically says this is how the expectation that we have of everybody within that community, right? Again, you don't have to agree with everything, but you at least have to respect it. And if it's not for you and you think that, okay, there's something in there I just cannot live with, maybe, you practice Go in isolation. Nobody's going to prevent you from doing Go, but your involvement in the community may be limited, or you may be self-limiting, right? Your participation in the Go community, if you're not willing to sort of, adapt, right, to some of those things. Again, not everything in there is going to be 100%, agreeable to everybody, but we all have to have some sort of common like a base, right, to go from. If we want to have, something that works for most people, right? Again, nothing's going to work for everybody, but we all need some sort of baseline to go from. We do a pretty good job, right? Enough so that, people who do come into the Go community want to stay in it. And I think that's a testament to the last 10 years and all the work that's gone in, the people that are involved, and the learner sort of attitude we take towards community management and community organization. Everybody in this call, right, who manages a user group knows how hard that stuff can be at times. So I think that's a testament to the people that are sort of providing the leadership for this community going forward. And hopefully the next 10 years is even better.
Yep. Roger, is there anything that you would point out that you really enjoyed from all the changes of the language or the community?
For me, the biggest change in the community has just been the size of it. It's interesting because you get, a lot of people that are familiar with the core code base and maybe familiar with the idioms there and write code that's like those idioms. But now there's the whole offshoots that write, very different style. Like, there's lots of people that have looked at Kubernetes, for example, and like, that's how you write Go, right? So they write Go like that, or, and I think that whole thing is really interesting, and I can talk to someone and I'll be mentioned something about, oh, really? You should do it like this? No, we do it like this, something totally different way. And I think that's kind of interesting. There are lots of ways to do it. And also there's this huge community that generates its own. There's many sub-ecosystems to Go now, I think. Lots of people that are familiar with a code base, that's how you do it, right? I think that's pretty interesting, how that's managed as time goes forward. Maybe you don't need to manage it, but maybe Go just helps. But I do think there are probably good ways to do it and bad ways to do it. And sometimes I look at code and I'm like, oh, really? You're doing Java and Go, or you're doing, some other language in Go, and maybe that's not ideal, but maybe that's the way forward. I don't know.
Gava and Gooby.
Yeah, I think scale changes everything, including the scale of the community. And when the community grows, you need different ways of dealing with that community. I think going forward, we will see probably the code of conduct being more important, or any written rules, some guidelines. Very much like a small village versus a big city. Go is becoming a bigger city now.
What's going on, Gophers? This episode is brought to you by Equinix Metal. If you want the choice and control of hardware with low overhead and the developer experience of the cloud, you need to check out Equinix Metal. Deploy in minutes across 18 global locations from Silicon Valley to Sydney. Visit metal.equinix.com/justaddmetal and receive $100 in credit to play with. Again, metal.equinix.com/justaddmetal. And by our friends at Fastly, they're running a massive promo on Compute at Edge. They're inviting our entire listener base to move latency-sensitive workloads to the edge with Compute at Edge free for 3 months, plus up to $100,000 a month in credit for an additional 6 months. This is a limited time offer, so head to fastly.com/podcast as soon as you can to check it out and get all the details. Here's the TLDR. Fastly's Edge Cloud Network and modern approach to serverless computing allows you to deploy and run complex logic at the edge with unparalleled security and blazing fast computational speed. Scale instantly and globally, reduce origin load, get real-time observability, and get seamless integration with your existing tech stack. Head to fastly.com/podcast to get Compute at Edge free for 3 months, plus up to $100,000 a month in credit for an additional 6 months. Once again, fastly.com/podcast.
The last few years, as you already mentioned a little bit, it has been picked up by large corporates, and it was widely adopted by all sorts of large companies and organizations. And if a decade ago you were a hipster to use Go, today less so. So how do you see the next 10, 12 years of Go?
Hipster. Raj, were you a hipster?
Never.
Before it was cool.
Maybe Mickey was.
Well, that's my Berlin world of context kicking in.
Well, it's really hard to predict, especially about the future, as Yogi Berra said. I think Go has a stable foundation that will keep it going. And I think that where it's aimed for, which is writing APIs and backend servers, I think that's where we see more and more from it. I don't see it jumping over to different places. Maybe, I don't know. It's not my guess, but I think the future looks good. So that's what I can say.
That's optimistic. Roger, what's your prediction?
I always think that Go would make a great language for programming graphics stuff in.
Mm-hmm.
I know it hasn't got into that place, but there's some interesting developments in that area. I kind of, maybe it would, but the area is so complex that maybe it never will. I think that Go excels in tooling, APIs and that sort of thing is great because you can have this whole back and forth between different sources of truth. You can generate code. There's a language called Q, which I think is great. There's called interplay between that kind of configuration-based stuff and more, imperative, more Go stuff. I think that's a really interesting area. I think there's a lot to be said for just using it to talk to existing services. Like, for example, if you want to use influx data, InfluxDB, you get Go. It's really easy. You just, who knows where it'll go.
I want to see Go running on Mars. That's the goal.
Ooh.
Rumor has it that SpaceX is using it, so...
Oh, so maybe sooner than later.
Yeah. Jenny, do you have a prediction?
I remember there was maybe it was the first or second GopherCon, one of the sort of people responsible for Go. I can't remember who exactly, but I remember one of the things they said was that it's always interesting when you help create something and you put it out there, some of the original use cases you were thinking of when you were devising this thing are coming at you, and you're wondering what in the world. I could have never foreseen this particular use case or how people are using it in this particular way and whatnot. And I think that's true today as it was 10 years ago. I think the use cases for Go are just going to continue to grow because as we add more and more people, right, new Gophers into the community, they're all going to bring their own ideas of what they'd like to use Go for. Some of the most popular tools and services and things that we use today, really it's just an initial sort of salvo, right? It's just a show of what basically solving a set of problems that we used to have, right? And using Go to solve those problems in a better way than we used to be able to solve them. That doesn't mean we're out of ideas for where Go can go next, right? We've just solved the problems that we used to have, better technology, better language now, right? There's a lot of innovation happening in our space. I mean, our field, right? What we do is sort of driven. Innovation is part and parcel to that. So the use cases of Go, I think we haven't seen all of them yet. It's just going to continue to grow, especially if Go sticks around for another 20, 30, 40 years, like things like C and C++ have. We're just at the tip of the iceberg. My wish for Go, really, I have two wishes. One for the language itself, the technology itself, but also for the community. I wish Go doesn't fall for the trap of sort of innovation for the sake of innovation, right? You saw how long it took, how much deliberation it took to add something like generics to the language, parametric polymorphism to the language. And it took a lot of back and forth, some like multiple revisions to design spec and a lot of back and forth, between prominent members of the community, users of the language, potential users of the feature and things like that. And even to this day, you have folks like, Russ Cox basically saying, hey, I'm sure we're going to have some guidelines for how to use Go properly, but, take it easy on that stuff for now as we learn what the best practices are. Maybe put your use of generics behind a build flag or something, right? So that's for those who want to use it, can use it. Those who don't want to, they can stick to the more tried and true things, right? So that level of reservation, that level of conservatism, with regards to adopting new things and new ways of doing things in the language, I hope we always sort of retain that, because I think keeping something simple is very, very hard. Keeping it easy to use, right? There's a reason why Go is easy to use when you compare it to other popular languages these days, right? That wasn't sort of by chance. That was a deliberate effort, right? And I hope that regardless of who's at the helm of the language over the years, I hope that we retain the sensibility, right, for the keeping the language simple, keeping the use of it simple, right? Because with a simple tool, you can then build more complicated things. But if the tool you have to use is also complicated, then your appetite for building these more powerful, more complex tools kind of dwindles a little bit, right? And that's when you start to have stagnation, and that's when you start to have sort of less innovation happening, right? So I hope we do retain that simplicity that is Go. And whatever the next major, perhaps controversial feature is going to be, who knows what that is after generics. Although thinking of it now, I'm hard pressed to think of something more controversial than generics was.
Operator overloading.
Oh boy.
Error handling.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah, the ground is fertile for controversial topics in addition to language. But I do hope we keep that simplicity as sort of the top sort of priority for us. And as for the community itself, the state of the community as a generally welcoming one, but was deliberate as well. A lot of people very early on said, okay, we've seen and been a part of communities that perhaps didn't get it right, or they're struggling to get it right. We've learned from their mistakes, and we're going to avoid these things as much as possible within the Go community. And I think a lot of the people that got on within the Go community, like early on, they were excited for the technology, but also for the potential of the community. I'm proud to say that I think we are living quite a bit of that potential. We're not all there yet. There's still a lot of work to do, but that's why I'm so proud to be part of this community, because we do live our values. We do care about people. And I hope the next 10 years, we continue to sort of retain that as a core value of who we are as Gophers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are all really interesting and good and positive predictions.
But
thanks for sharing all that.
Sounds like you got something.
Yeah, what do you think, Natalie?
Yes, Natalie.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the unpopular opinion, but what do I see for the next decade or 12 years? What else is there to say other than I hope it will stay simple, I hope it will keep being friendly, and I hope it will be on Mars. So now one of the even fun reasons that I get when people ask me why should I use Go, I can even say something simple like, it's very easy to get started with, and it's probably you're going to get either a salary increase or at the very least not a cut, which is not something you can say about all languages. So I hope that it will keep being a language that we want to use for many reasons.
Nice.
Well, that will not be my unpopular opinion because I came prepared. Okay.
Ooh.
I just want you to know that. But before that, let's do the unpopular opinion theme.
I actually think you should probably leave.
So normally I would start by asking you all what are your unpopular opinions, but I came, as I said, very prepared. I already asked on Twitter, so I'm just going to state it, and there's no even need to test it, as we do with all the unpopular opinions that we hear by asking on our Twitter handle, is this opinion unpopular or not? It was unpopular, but only by a little bit, so something like 55-45. So avocado toast, not with fresh tomatoes, but with dried tomatoes. Somehow, most of my Twitter feed got it wrong and said or thought mistakenly, and it's okay, we all make mistakes, that you need to use it to eat that with fresh tomatoes. But no. So that's a validated, unpopular opinion.
I have to say, I've never had avocado toast.
That is a confusing situation.
And it's true and false for you at the same time.
It's Schrodinger's opinion.
I love avocados and I love toast, so I'm sure the combination is good. But
You know, I think in different countries, toast can mean different things, right? So I don't know if you think of like two toasted breads and the avocado in between them also toasted versus just toasted bread. And then
That's a sandwich.
well, I've been to many countries, I've seen things. So, you know, it can always be more clear.
yeah, I have to say, I don't even know. You know, it's got toast and it's got avocados, but I have no idea what else it's got. A little bit of dressing, maybe.
It was out of order execution. I fried the avocado and then here's bread.
Chilies. You'd have to have chilies in it. For me, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so Roger, what is your unpopular opinion for today?
The opinion I gave when I was on the show before would turn out not to be very unpopular at all. But I have one that I know I hold, and I know that it is unpopular. So I will just say it. I believe that Acme is the best text editor. And most people haven't even heard of this text editor. So I think it's an amazing editor. And that Rob Pike was not misled when he said that the mouse is an excellent way to interact, better than the keyboard with an editor. And actually, there was a recent episode of Dev Tool Time recently when I explored this topic a little bit recently. Worth checking out if you're interested. But I think it's an amazing and productive way to develop.
Well, you should add the link both to the editor and to that episode in the show notes so that anybody who hears this later on can go and check this out.
I will do.
Well, Miki, do you have an unpopular opinion?
Yes, my unpopular opinion is that when picking speakers to conferences, the speaker is more important than the subject.
Mm-hmm.
The speaker is more important than the subject in conference talks. Interesting. I cannot predict if this will be popular or not.
So some speakers may attract a larger audience than others, but it doesn't matter what the topic is. The speaker alone is enough.
Yes, I think that great speakers give me a talk about flies and they'll do it magnificently. And then there are some really, really talented people that will talk on a really interesting subject in a boring and bad way. So I think when you're doing talks, which is a medium, you need to know how to do it. And you're there for somewhat for entertaining people, not just educating them. The speaker is more important.
Good speaking skills is definitely something to practice.
I think I agree with that, actually, because I think a good speaker will find ways to make even a mundane subject really interesting. You might think, oh, this isn't very interesting. And then they bring some life and bring some things. I never thought of that.
Right. There's nuance there, right? So it's not about the popularity of the speaker themselves. It's about their delivery mechanism or how well they're able to keep your attention or get you interested in something that might otherwise be a mundane topic. So, yeah, there's some nuance to that. Yeah. But interestingly enough, like those people who are able to do that become the more popular speakers.
Yeah.
So they're kind of hand in hand.
Johnny, do you have an unpopular opinion for us?
Yeah, I believe trackballs are better than those things you drag around on your desk, collecting dust. Just use your thumb. That's way, way more efficient.
No, just use Vim like I do.
Don't use a mouse at all, he says. Trackballs over, what do you even call those things? Like just regular mice?
I think they're optical now.
How about trackpads?
Trackpads?
Yeah, what you have on your laptop.
I do use those because those provide a more, I guess at this stage, a more natural sort of interaction surface. Mm-hmm. But if you're gonna have a mouse, like a regular old school mouse,
okay.
Those are what I'm thinking that we need to move on. We're in a different era now. Either use a trackpad or if you want to stick to the old school, the better technology is the ball. You have to use a trackball.
So why is the ball better? I'm interested. Maybe I should get one.
It's a stationary surface. The only thing moving is your thumb. And you can go anywhere in the screen. You don't have to, get carpal tunnel, just hand around on the desk and everything else. It's just one nice surface. Your hand just stays there. If you want to get sophisticated, some of these things even have different positions they can take to accommodate your hand and everything else. I mean, it's really quite a different experience.
Maybe I should get one.
Yeah, you should absolutely get one.
I mean, I use the mouse all the time. They use the keyboard as a control surface. I don't use keyboard shortcuts, right? So the mouse is very important to me.
Yeah, and then you will love a trackball.
But if I have a Lenovo ThinkPad, and that works when I use the touch point thing, the little orange nipple thing.
Oh God, those are awful.
I find those work really well for me. I can use that really well.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's 2 unpopular opinions in one episode.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Oh man.
It's because I need 3 buttons, right? So I can't use the trackpad type thing.
All right. Well, there you have it.
There. That's going to be interesting. Curious to see the results of the survey. Mm-hmm. And until the survey, I want to say thank you for joining us and see you all in 1 decade or earlier.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for hanging with us. GopherCon is right around the corner, and we have 3 Go Time Live sessions. We're doing a panel discussion, an AMA with the Go team, and we're playing another round of Gopher Say. Register today and add our sessions to your agenda at gophercon.com. Tickets start at $0. Go Time is produced by me, Jared Santo, with music by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. We are brought to you by some awesome partners. Thanks again to Fastly, Linode, and LaunchDarkly. Next week, we have Dominic St. Pierre on the pod, He speaks with John about his experience transitioning to using a screen reader and learning to code without his vision. They discuss how some of the tooling works, things other devs can do to make their code more accessible for blind teammates, and a whole lot more. That's coming up next time on Go Time.